In Wisconsin, Republican Governor Scott Walker will have to pass the baton to Democrat Tony Evers come January. Now, Tony Evers was a pretty solid candidate. He was Our Revolution endorsed, and he might actually do some stuff when he gets elected. He might actually not be, a third-way New Democrat corporate centrist. He might actually stand up for the people. So now, because he won, the Republican legislature is handcuffing the soon-to-be Democratic government in what's effectively a legislative coup. So take a look at this. They want to cut down the number of early voting days, limiting it to 2 weeks. This would likely draw legal challenges. The proposal is very similar to a previous law that the courts struck down in 2016 for stifling votes for partisan gain. Now, let me pause there and just real quick explain that. As a general rule, the more votes there are, the more likely it is Democrats win. Because when voter turnout is up, that means younger people turned out in droves, and younger people demographically, statistically, overwhelmingly are vote in the left direction. So that's why you see all these attempts from Republicans all across the country to limit voter turnout without them coming out and saying like, oh yeah, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to limit voter turnout. But that's what voter ID is, for example. That's what it is when they try to limit early voting days. That's what it is when they oppose making voting a holiday. They oppose automatic voter registration. So all of that is to try to go after the left and keep turnout down, because when turnout is down, it's usually more older people that come out, and older people lean to the right demographically. So that's what they're doing that for. Let's continue. Give the legislature more power over the boards of certain commissions like the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, the state's jobs-focused agency, which has come under a lot of scrutiny for giving the Taiwanese company Foxconn Technology Group $3 billion in tax breaks in exchange for their $10 billion factory, an investment that even the state's legislative bureau said the state wouldn't bring returns until after 2043. Evers said he wanted to get rid of WEDC altogether, as it has garnered a reputation for falling short of its jobs promise. Okay, so let me explain that one. Basically, Scott Walker set up this agency, which entire point is to do corporate welfare. So give a lot of money to mega corporations who don't need it, give a lot of money to the rich who don't need it, and then sit back and hope that they create jobs. That's the whole idea. So it's basically a private-public partnership where you're allowing giant private companies to loot the treasury. That's what that is. So he has a lot of direct control of it at the way the rules work now. But if Tony Evers gets in there, he would have direct control of it. Scott Walker knows that Tony Evers would not bias that agency simply in favor of the rich and mega corporations. So what's he doing? They're turning over the decision-making process and the control of that agency more to the state legislature, who's still controlled by Republicans. So naked power grab. Next, let's keep going. Limit Evers' abilities to change the state's work requirement laws around food stamps and health care, giving the legislature oversight over any federal waivers the state has received. Walker pushed for Medicaid work requirement waivers and waivers to drug test food stamp recipients. And finally, they say, stop Wisconsin's incoming attorney general from withdrawing the state from a federal lawsuit against the Affordable Care Act, instead of requiring legislative approval to do so. So that would be one of the first things that Evers does when he gets power. He would stop the state's attorney general from taking part in a federal lawsuit against the Affordable Care Act, because a bunch of Republican governors are involved in a federal lawsuit against the Affordable Care Act. They're trying to totally strike it down. By the way, that's why one of the many reasons why it's total bullshit when they say, oh, we're for protections for pre-existing conditions. You're literally engaged in a lawsuit right now which is trying to take that away. So I don't care about your rhetoric. I care about your actions, and your actions are against protections for pre-existing conditions. But Evers can come in there and stop that, and so now they're trying to take away his power to be able to do that, and again, turn it over to the legislature, because the legislature, because of gerrymandering, by the way, is still under Republican control. So listen, I mean, this isn't going to be a surprise to many of you, but it's interesting to see it in such a stark, clear way. These guys don't favor democracy. They don't believe in democracy. They don't believe in justice. They don't believe in having a process, following the process. The peaceful transition of power is another thing that we often talk about in this country as, oh my God, this is the hallmark of an enlightened civilization and we're able to do it. Well, this is effectively not that. This is, those smoke-filled back rooms where they hatch conspiracies. That's exactly what this is, and it's happening in Wisconsin. And fact of the matter is, it's not even that much of a silent conspiracy or a behind closed doors conspiracy. It started that way, but now they're just letting that freak flag fly, and they're like, yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to do a naked power grab, and we're going to handcuff the Democratic governor, and guess what? You ain't going to do dick about it. You going to stop us? You can't stop us. You know what else they did? In one day, they approved 82 Scott Walker appointments. What? Because they know, if we fill him now, then Evers won't be able to fill him. Oh, my God. So this all goes back to a theme that you've heard on this show a lot recently. And the theme was sparked by looking at what's happening with the leadership battle in Congress with Pelosi. How now Pelosi's the furthest left option that we have. So it's like they checkmate us up front. That's Machiavellian politics. And it's time for the left to get Machiavellian. It's time for us to realize that, and I know I'm ripping off Barry Goldwater with a version of his quote, but extremism in defense of democracy is no vice. So in other words, if you need to twist arms politically, and you need to hatch some devious plots politically in order to defeat factions who are anti-democratic, defeat factions who are pro-oligarchy, defeat factions who are tyrannical, go right ahead and do it. And by the way, I honestly think this is because FDR, he did some court packing, and everybody goes, "Oh, I cannot believe, good sir." But I think what FDR recognized is that, we're fighting an asymmetrical war here against the right because they're willing to do whatever tactics for their ends. And, of course, their ends are basically oligarchy. Cut taxes for the rich, deregulate, endless war, all these things. So if we're fighting asymmetrical warfare against them, then what happens? We never get anything that we actually want in place because the right keeps dragging the Overton window further and further right, and then the Democrats keep insisting, we'll meet you in the middle, and we care very much about decorum and civility and process. And then as a result of that, you now have the left fringe in U.S. politics, oftentimes, with a few exceptions, but oftentimes the left fringe is flat-out corporate centrism. It's like, that's the best you're going to get, so just take it. No, it's time to drag that spectrum back to the left. It's time to fight. It's time to fight. That's the most important point. Fight. Fight for what you believe in, and fight when you know you're right. And in this case, it's not a question. It's not a question whether or not what Scott Walker and the Republicans are doing here is ethical or moral or just. We know they're wrong. So fight. Fight them on it. Get Machiavellian. Be crystal clear in your position and meet your goals. So it's frustrating to see that this is the way it works, and they always kind of get away with it. They stole a fucking election from Stacey Abrams in Georgia, and now nobody's even talking about it anymore. It's just, hey, we stole it, now fuck off. And honestly, I even saw examples of, after they stole it, Stacey Abrams going on mainstream media, and they berate her for mentioning it. They berate her. Establishment, asshole, corporate journalist, so-called journalist. She brings up like, oh, hey, the guy oversaw his own fucking election because he was Secretary of State as he was running for governor. He purged 350,000 voters. He even purged, a bunch of voters that we signed up as part of the New Georgia Project, which I was the head of. They stole the election. So she says something along those lines, and then they go, oh, are you saying the election was stolen? Yes, that's what she's fucking saying, and she's right. Why aren't you in the media doing your fucking job of reporting the facts and reporting the information and reporting the data and saying, oh, you know what, Stacey? We fact-checked you, and it turns out you're correct. That's exactly what happened. But they don't do that. They don't do that. They shame you for stepping out of line, stepping out of the process. Meanwhile, these motherfuckers shit all over the process. Are they following the fucking process here? No, they're doing a legislative coup to handcuff the will of the voters and to handcuff the incoming Democratic governor. It's a fucking sick joke. And by the way, national Democrats, mum's the word. They don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck about what's happening here. Oh, boy. So there we go. The only good news out of this is, what they don't understand is this. They're breeding a new brand of leftist that they're not going to want to fuck with. That new brand of leftist, it's the kind of leftist that you guys are. You know, the demographics for this show, obviously overwhelmingly young, relatively young, especially when you compare it to mainstream media. So, and we look at what's happening in the system, and there's this streak of like, oh, fuck no. We know that's wrong, and we're going to do whatever we can to address this, and we're going to do whatever we can to get the policies that we know would fix the country. So they don't know who they're fucking with, and they don't know what they've created. I mean, you want to talk about a backlash? They're about to see a fucking backlash. And they better thank their lucky stars that, you know, somebody like me, I actually believe in peace. I have a principled belief in domestic peace. I'm more from the Martin Luther King school of thought of nonviolent resistance. They better thank their lucky stars that there are some people that take that position, and it's not simply, oh, we're not going to stand for this, and we're going to fucking riot, and we're going to literally fight back. Because if there was ever something that would spark that kind of a reaction, I mean, this is what it is. How many times you want to kick people when they're down and spit in their eye and lie to them and pretend to care about democracy and process, only to turn around and use immoral, unethical, incorrect, wrong, dictatorial tactics in the process. So it's time to fight back. It's time to fight back. It's time to get our hands dirty. It's time to be Machiavellian. It's time to use nonviolent political tools to do what we know the right things are.